With Unitarians across the world, we light our chalice flame this morning as a sign of our gathering. With the chalice lighting today, chosen especially for this month of July 2021 by the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists. This is an English translation of words from the Unitarian community in Rio de Janeiro. We light this flame as a reminder of our mission of being a light of the world. In unity with those who came before us, with whom we are a spiritual family, we shall be able to commit to the building of a community of free faith beyond geographical limits and personal beliefs. May we be a shelter to all who need it the most. Amen. Welcome. Welcome to this, the Seven Oaks Unitarian Meeting House, on today, the 4th of July. Now, the 4th of July is, of course, American Independence Day, a big day of celebration in America, a remembrance of that time when the country was able to step away from colonial control by the Brits. It holds a little bit of a love within this meeting house too. The Colgate family, who ended up founding the toothpaste company, or the soap company, and then toothpaste in America. But the Colgate family were a strong family here at the Bessells Green Unitarian Meeting House. It was a General Baptist meeting house at that point. The congregation never changed. Their theology merged and shifted. And the Colgate family left here in the 1780s, 1790s to go and live in the States, away from the pressure, the political pressure that they felt here. And they needed change and they needed revolution, and they found their home in the United States. So here we are, 4th of July, Independence Day. Not the only thing that the 4th of July is an anniversary for, and we'll come to that as we move through our service. It's a simple service today. We do have readings from Americans in here. I think that's right. And there's a focus as well on a different American anniversary that we're celebrating. But this is a time and a space for you. A time and a space to just allow yourself to be, to connect, to reflect, to build yourself. A short time away from other things during your no doubt busy week. I welcome you to this meeting house today. This time and this space are yours. I bid you welcome. As we settle into this place away, this quiet centre of peace and stillness, perhaps just for this hour, we turn to a hymn. With words by Stopford Brooke, a timeless recognition that the simplicity we often crave is already around us, if only we look. So simple is the human heart. The words will be on your screen.
A little sun, a little rain.
Our first reading today is from Ian Adams's book, Cave, Refectory, Road. Ian Adams is an Anglican priest, but this book was written for a wider audience. It describes the purpose of the religious life, specifically the monastic tradition, and it brings through some of the teaching and practices to our everyday lives. How might we build our virtual monastery in the midst of our busy lives? This is from the chapter on the way of simplicity. I'm afraid of deep water. I can swim, but perhaps only enough to get out of trouble if I fall into calm water. So sea swimming is always a challenging idea for me. But on a warm day, when the ocean temperature has risen to a reasonable level, perhaps late June after a good early summer, it seems to evolve from a good idea into something that must be done. My sea swimming wife happily swims way out. I feel daring just getting out of my depth, but once the initial cold has subsided, I love the experience. My fear of drowning meets the grace of salt water, fragility of human form dancing slowly in the immense strength of the ocean. My hyperactive noise is overcome by the sound of the sea. This moment is everything. This is enough. We live in a world, however, that suggests we never have enough. The religious life has much to do with helping its participants reach a point where we can say and believe that all our this, what we have, where we are, who we are, is enough. But to learn to live this way requires our immersion in the trustworthiness of existence, of giving ourselves to the goodness of the cosmos, and as the monastics would encourage us, free falling into the goodness of God. A life of this is enough demands that we face our fear of drowning. It requires us to set out into deep water and trust ourselves to what we will find there. Contemporary living involves our compliance with a complex network of interconnections. Some of these connections bring freedom and release and creative energy. There is much about the multiplicity of ways that humans connect with each other now that is really energizing. I'm writing this on a laptop, connecting with friends and colleagues and strangers across the world by Facebook, Twitter, and email. But it can sometimes feel as if the network of connections, pins, information transfer is suffocating us. In a complex society, the religious life appears, at least initially, to offer a simpler way to live. Often, the first thing that strikes me when I spend time with a monastic community is the sense of moving towards simplicity. A simple wardrobe. For each monk, a cowl and a tunic will survive. a collective purse, no personal possessions, a rhythm of life, caring for the poor, a sense of abundance with less, happiness with the small, and a rootedness to the earth. There is less of almost everything that most of us surround ourselves with. Fewer words, fewer images, less stuff. And more of the things that we sense may enhance and reimagine the experience of human being. More depth, stillness, more reflection. There is undoubtedly a movement towards simplicity in the religious life, but it's really important to realize that for most monastic communities, the religious life is not and should not be a refuge from the world. A disciple life needs to be lived within the wider world, not with our backs turned towards it. The words of Ian Adams. Let us join together in prayer. Let silence be placed around us, like a mantle. Let us enter into it as though through a small, secret door, stooping to emerge into an acre of peace, where stillness reigns and the mystery is ever present. Eternal Spirit, help us to descend into the depths of our being, below our conscious and subconscious life, until we discover our real selves, that which is given to each of us alone, the divine likeness in which we are each made and into which we are to grow, the place where you commune with us, the spring from which all our lives arise. Eternal Spirit, Mother, Father, ever present if only we have eyes to see, we stand in awe in the presence of the universe. In its proper time, may the mystery unfurl before us. Though fettered by our material desires, may the depths of the Spirit uphold and guide us. May the great gifts of the earth sustain us. May the universe forgive our faults and our follies, and may we in equal measure be forgiving. May we ever turn our eyes toward the light, to dispel the darkness which would engulf us. We give thanks for the bounty of the universe, which abounds with power and glory beyond our greatest imaginings. If you wish to, I welcome you to join with me in the words of the last prayer, following the words on the screen. Eternal Spirit, may we be led from death to life, from falsehood to truth. May we be led from despair to hope, from fear to trust. May we be led from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. Amen. Our second reading is from a favourite writer of mine. One I've read quite often on these YouTube services, and in fact this reading we've had before. It's a really important one for me. It's the late Unitarian Universalist minister Elizabeth Tarbox, and this is a piece from her collection Life Tides, and is called, quite simply, Sufficiency. There is a limit to how much awe I can feel, even when I'm standing on a beach at dawn with all that religious means rolled out before my wondering eyes. There is a limit to my acquisitiveness. I have more than enough stuff now. I have all the things I could possibly want to make my life comfortable. I have plenty of belongings. Thank you. But love, oh God, there is no limit to my longing for love. Love is so elusive and so precious and doesn't follow any rules. I can't make people love me or keep their love once I have it or invested in the bond market and draw on the interest. I can't catch love in a bottle and look at it in the afternoon when I'm lonely. I can't get love on demand with a bank card. Knowing that love is not a limited resource, not an endangered species, doesn't help at all. What does it matter if there is a vast ocean of love out there if I'm not able to immerse myself in it? If I'm locked up in here, without a drop of the ocean's moisture to bless me? Here's what I can do. I can be open to the possibility of love. I can recognize love when it's offered. I can be vulnerable, knowing that those who dare not risk giving are unable to receive. I could admit that being loved is an exercise in letting go, in surrendering control, in being humbly grateful for what is given. I can accept love and let even the smallest amount of it grow in me and shine out of me. I can say at last, the love you give me is very good. And it is enough. The words of Elizabeth Tarbox. We've heard about simplicity and sufficiency, and our second hymn continues this theme, a traditional Shaker song known as Simple Gifts. 'Tis the gift to be simple. The words will be on your screens. It is the 4th of July. For many, notably across the Atlantic, but in fact around the world, the 4th of July is remembered as American Independence Day. Recognising the day in 1776, when the 13 states declared their independence from British colonial rule. Now, the Brits, of course, didn't actually recognise this in 1776, but they did eventually come around. But the 4th of July remains the date, Independence Day. Now, for those that are intrigued by coincidence, 4th of July is also the day that the second and the third presidents of the US, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, both died on the same day, on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration, which they both signed. It's a bit spooky. And Jefferson was a Unitarian, by theology, if not membership, but as a slave owner, that's a bit of a tricky story. However, another key part of American history that fell on the 4th of July, certainly for many of those Unitarian inclined, was not just American Independence Day, but the 4th of July was the decision by Henry David Thoreau to move into a small hut on the shore of Walden Pond, near the Massachusetts town of Concord. The intent was to step away from the growing consumerism and materialism of the 1840s. Does that ring a bell? And to trial self-sufficiency, independence. Building a hut to live in, growing food, using time to learn. Thoreau's book of the experiment, called simply Walden, has been a mainstay of environmentalists, religious seekers, and many others ever since. Now, I have been to Walden Pond. In 2011, I was fortunate to be sponsored to visit Unitarian Universalists in Massachusetts, and one Thursday I visited the town of Concord, and I saw Emerson's house and the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, where many leading East Coast thinkers are buried. And I walked to and around Walden Pond. It's about an hour's walk outside of the town, and the site of Henry David Thoreau's hut is clearly marked, and a history trail surrounds it all now. Thoreau was a transcendentalist. Now, he was one of the many around the 1830s and 40s that followed a philosophy that believed people were inherently good, and that they showed their best when in nature, and when self-reliant and independent. Now, some transcendentalists were Unitarian, and there was a close link between the two groups, but not all were. And Thoreau himself was raised a Unitarian. His parents were Unitarian, but he did not formally align to the movement as an adult. Now, fellow Concord resident, the Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, was, however, Henry David's best friend and mentor. And at the time that all this hut was happening in 1845, Emerson actually owned the woods that Thoreau built his hut in. Yet it was the transcendentalist approach that led him to his great experiment at Walden. Now, he was there very precisely for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. And in his own words, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front the only essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, to discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep. Now, the whole book is written in quite a long and ancient prose. It's quite hard to read. I'm not going to pretend I've read the whole thing. I haven't. But I have dipped into it over the years and taken out pieces as I've been sort of focused on certain areas. But the book is well read, and the key is an attempt to strip away everything unnecessary. That was his plan, to focus on becoming one with nature, to use the time constructively for learning and for writing. He did both while he was there, and to become self-sufficient as part of the natural world around him. Now, in the book, he comes to several conclusions on the life well lived. He discovers self-reliance, simplicity, meditation. And becoming one with nature is the key for him of a life well lived. And none of this is easy, and patience is a virtue that's emphasised throughout the book. Nothing he wants is going to appear immediately. He has to work to it, he has to think about it, he has to deliberately take steps to achieve it. Now, importantly, as he experiences this new way of life over these 2 years, 2 months and 2 days, he experiences a spiritual awakening. A recognition of the deeper truths that might only be found when the mounds of daily stuff are swept away. Throughout, Thoreau aligns moments of his awakening to the natural progress of the natural world around him. The transformation of the natural world, notably from winter to spring, from death to life, is worded in clear biblical structure, mirroring the idea of the resurrection from the dead. For Thoreau, this resurrection was the transformation of himself, his spiritual awakening. Now, there is a theme here that aligns closely with the words of Ian Adams' book in our first reading. Talking about that possibility of bringing the monastic approach to everyday life. He references the simple, stripped-back approach of monasteries, the religious within them, the removal of the unnecessary, the distracting and the superfluous. And this notion of simplicity enables the religious, the monastics, to focus instead on finding a deeper connection. Through reflection, meditation and prayer, the presence of the divine, of the all that is, of God, is sensed to be close by, as one. Now, of course, there is a risk, and clearly I'm talking about the possibility for us all to live this stripped-back, simplified life, to clear away the stuff. But there is a risk here. It's quite a privileged statement to encourage simplicity and time for reflection. There is an all too obvious risk that we might consider only those that can afford to give up the materialistic life. Minimalism is, strangely, something that is often only managed by the wealthy, by those that can afford the time, the space, the assistance that supports a life with less clutter. Now, Henry David Thoreau was alive to this. There's a chapter of Walden called Baker Farm, and it talks when Henry David Thoreau, he gets caught in a rainstorm one afternoon, and he has to take shelter in a dirty, dismal hut of his neighbour, John Field, and his family. And John is an Irish labourer, and his family all live with him in this hut, and they are just about scraping by. Money is almost non-existent, and they have nothing. Now, Thoreau, good middle-class boy that he is, tries to persuade the family of the wonders of living a self-sufficient life in the woods. No employer, no money, things to think about, you can read, you can learn. John Field is not impressed. From his very different, imposed poverty, he seeks instead luxuries in life. That is what he wants to achieve, the chance to live the American dream, to make something of himself. Now, interestingly, Ian Adams's monastics are not wealthy either, but are content with their life. They literally give up everything to follow the life of the religious. There is no material safety net. There is no escape through a trust fund when things get tough. So where is the difference? Well, in Ian Adams's piece, he is very careful to stress that the life of the religious is not a retreat from the heat of life. It is not a refuge, as he put it at the end. Instead, engagement with the world is a critical element in allowing that deeper connection with the actual world around. Monastics, monks, nuns, known as the religious, are known for their work they undertake, or at least undertook when there were more, in the communities in which they were based. Hospitals were often founded at the monasteries, and the convents provided healthcare in different ways too. It is no coincidence that Nonatus House in the BBC's Call the Midwife is a convent, with the religious headed out into the local poor communities in East London to help with childhood, with parenthood, with managing lives in really difficult circumstances. So there's a difference between Thoreau and the religious in that context, but there is an underlying theme that flows through both Thoreau and Adams's work. The notion that the connection to God, perhaps the submission to God, tricky word in our privileged world, but this notion of submission is to something greater. And this is the difference for the religious and for Thoreau. Now, it's not a new idea. Buddhism has provided a similar approach to life for thousands of years, long before the Christian monastics began their work. For Buddhists, life is marred by suffering. Everything and everyone suffers, and the cycle of life is a story of trying to remove attachments to suffering, to attain nirvana, perfection. And to do this, the Buddha taught, the disciple must learn to overcome desire and attachments, to focus on deeper truths, to meditate, to become one with the universe around. And through good works, through environmental protection, through helping the poor and the sick, we start to see the richness of the simple life. It may be simple on the surface, but the complex connections of love, care, commitment, and selfless submission to making things better for others are far from simple in their impact. In our second reading, this approach was bolstered by Elizabeth Tarbox's distillation of simplicity to a recognition of the importance of love in the world. Her piece closed with these words: I can be open to the possibility of love. I can recognize love when it's offered. I can be vulnerable, knowing that those who dare risk giving are unable to receive. I can admit that being loved is an exercise in letting go, in surrendering control, in being humbly grateful for what is given. I can accept love and let even the smallest amount of it grow in me and shine out of me. I can say at last, the love that you give me is very good, and it is enough. It's this recognition that our spiritual lives are dependent on love, on the receiving, but more importantly perhaps, on the giving of love, allowing it to grow inside and, as Elizabeth Tarbox says, to shine out, to underpin our every step, our every action. 176 years ago today, on the 4th of July 1845, Henry David Thoreau started his work to simplify, to become self-reliant, to connect with nature. And today, on the 4th of July 2021, as the world encourages us to emerge from lockdown with a depressing push to move back to the path of material gain and more stuff, perhaps we might look instead at how we spend our money more carefully, how we might live the lives of love, how we might simplify our own lives with an overriding intent that we are removing the obstacles to give love more easily, to submit to the deeper need to bring love and care to all those that need it. It's simple enough. Let us come now to a time of calm, a time of stillness. As we settle our bodies, perhaps closing our eyes, focusing on our breath. I shall speak some words, and I shall strike the singing bowl, and we'll come together in stillness and silence together. Music will break that stillness and allow us to continue our reflections. So as we settle our bodies, closing our eyes, I speak some words by Henry David Thoreau from the book Walden. Let us spend just one day as deliberately as nature. Let us spend just one day as deliberately as nature. Some closing words. Spirit of life, we give thanks for your presence. For our time together in the presence of love, we are grateful. May the love and the care we find in this community stay with us and strengthen us in our busy lives ahead. May there be peace amongst us all, now and forever.